Welcome to Behind the Build. I'm your host, Jonathan Jacobs, and today I have with me Beth Wassermuhl from StudioWI.
That is correct. Hi, Jonathan. Nice to see you today.
Thanks for coming to my house and participating in this fun endeavor.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm very grateful to be able to have this kind of platform, if you will.
Yeah, well, I met Beth through a friend of ours, a mutual friend of ours, Brenda Eisen.
Correct.
And this was a number of years ago. And over the last few years, we had looked at a few projects together between her practice of StudioWI and Walden Homes.
Mm-hmm.
We've not yet partnered on one, and that's
Yet.
I say yet. We've not yet partnered on one. But her history in architecture, her passion for architecture, and her really, I would say, charismatic personality is part of one of the reasons why I wanted to have you on today. I reached out to you a long time ago, and we've worked with our calendars, and it's finally happening.
It's finally happening. The moment is now. The present is here.
So, Beth Wassermuhl.
Yes.
StudioWI.
It's very nice to be here. It's been a while in planning.
Yeah.
And I come from an architecture family.
I know you do. Yes.
And yeah.
So it's what's interesting. I'm cutting you off as you say that.
That's okay. Go ahead.
There have been a few people that I've had on that have had architecture running rampant through their family.
Oh, amazing.
And I have found that those people
running rampant. I love that, by the way.
Oh, it's
rampantly running.
Yeah.
It's a to-do, as they say.
Yes. And I found that those people are generally very, very well versed at what they do.
Yeah.
And that the path to getting to where they are was more roundabout.
Oh.
Not everyone necessarily wanted to follow the path because it was so in front of them.
I love that you said that. I feel like that encapsulates so much of what I wanted to talk about today. No, seriously, because, so some of the great things about, just like to go through like kind of how it was as a child.
Yeah.
I had the opportunity to, see creatives at work. And that for me was, that was the biggest influence on me. And also not only seeing the creatives, but having that nurtured in me, having another creative in the family who recognizes it and nurtures it. Huge, right?
Who's this creator?
Okay, so so my father, Saul Wassermuhl.
Yep.
He led a company called Page and Steel Architects, which was actually one of the oldest it's no longer Page and Steel. There's no firm anymore. It's been transmuted into other incarnations. But it was one of the oldest firms in the city for a very long time, established in 1930. And it was founded by Forsey Page and Harlan Steele. And, these were guys that were born in the 1800s, right? Which is like, it is crazy. It's crazy to think about.
What do they know about architecture in the 1800s? I mean, here.
Nothing.
Right? Not like in Europe, but
here. Yeah. But that's another conversation. But the company had been around for a very long time. My father joined in 1970, and he led the firm for quite some time. And so I had a lot of exposure to it from a very young age. And it was amazing. As I had mentioned, like there were so many creatives. And also, I think the other thing that was so wonderful is seeing all the stakeholders, how you need so many different types of people to come together. Mm-hmm. All the consultants, the owners. There's so many players at stake. And also the time it takes to actually make something in the real world, right?
We know a lot about that. That's what we do at Walden.
Yeah.
We take the time.
Exactly.
And it takes time.
Yeah, it's true. Any builder, right? Yeah. Like any builder knows.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's,
Do it faster and do it for less.
Exactly. And, some of the larger projects that I've worked on, they're 10, 12 years in the making easily, from acquisition to final completion.
Yep.
It's a long process. And, seeing that as a child, you really you see how much work it takes. And it's a lot of work.
It takes work.
It's a lot of work. It's a lot of commitment. Yeah. So I went in kind of with my eyes wide open. But at the same time, I kind of feel like I had to find my own path. It's kind of like what you were saying.
Yeah, because I think I have a brother who became a lawyer. My father was a lawyer. And there's that side of you that says, I want to carve my own path. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to necessarily live in the shadow of the originator.
Yes.
Right?
Absolutely.
And am I going to be able to live up to what they did?
Yes. It's the weight of the expectation that kind of plays tricks on you,
but
right?
The interesting thing is, you're a parent now, right?
Yes, it's true.
So now, you've been a parent. So you realize as a parent, differently than when you started your career as a professional, that really all you want is for your children to be happy and successful at what they do.
It's true.
That the weight is actually created by you.
Absolutely.
Not by them.
Yes. And in general, everything is all the narrative in your head. That's not real. It's the whole narrative, right? In the end, your work speaks for itself, right? And what you do is what you do. And all of that stuff doesn't really matter at the end of the day, but it's hard to kind of understand that as you're going through it. But I think, my dad told me this great story. And I'm going to tell you the story because it's really, you'll see kind of, you'll see the inspiration of it all. So he, as I had mentioned, he was working at Page & Steel. He was fresh out of school. Yep. And his first project was the top 2 floors of Commerce Court.
Okay.
In Toronto. Yep. So Commerce Court was built in, the first building was built in 1930. And then in 1970, there was a complex of buildings that came up, 3 towers. And the architect is actually I.M. Pei. Have you heard of I.M. Pei? No. So I.M. Pei is a Chinese-American architect who did the pyramid at the Louvre. Are you familiar with that?
Yeah, of course.
Okay.
So if I said no to that, I think I'd have to shut down the podcast.
Yeah, he's pretty famous. It's so iconic, right?
Yeah,
when you think of Paris, you think of the pyramid at the Louvre. Yeah. That's what you think of. So hugely famous. He did that much later. Well, not much later. He did that after, but hugely famous American architect and who designed Commerce Court. And Page & Steel was the architect of record on those buildings. And so my dad comes out of school and they give him essentially the top 2 executive floors where the CEOs were going to work, the headquarters, so to speak. Yeah, to design.
As his first project.
Okay. Yeah. And it's the interiors. And so, he's telling me about this project and, no budget, first of all. This is the bank of CIBC, their main flagship. And there's no budget. And so he comes up with the craziest things. So first of all, it's kind of wacky, actually, to even talk about it. So the room was in the shape of an octagon, their boardroom, their main boardroom. And not only was the room in the shape of an octagon, the conference table was also in the shape of an octagon. Why an octagon? Because that was their logo, I guess, is an octagon or a hexagon. And so you've got this octagon-shaped room, octagon-shaped table. And my dad's challenge was to design a conference table for these banking suit guys, old white guys, essentially, to go from 48 people down to 24.
Okay.
For the conference table.
Okay.
And that's kind of a challenge, right? Especially when it's an octagon.
Yeah.
So how are you going to do that? So he tells me about designing this table, which is solid walnut. And there's these 2 pieces that's kind of float apart and form credenzas on opposite sides of the room. Mm-hmm. And then, when it's time to make it a bigger table again, they float back together. And when I say float, I mean, they actually levitated. They had an electrical engineer figure out a way. There were no casters.
Okay.
They had an electrical engineer on the project figure out a way to magnetically levitate these parts of the conference table that they floated away and floated back together.
Like in the ground.
Like in the ground.
Yeah. So
and in the table.
Right. So they would have had something like a positive and a positive or a negative and negative in the bottom of these tables, but like weighted
Something
enough to be able to support the weight of the solid wood. There must have been huge magnets.
It's like wacky. Yeah. I know.
Yeah,
I know. Like I can't even begin to like figure this out really.
Okay.
It's too weird. It's like cinematic or something. You know what it reminds me of is, did you ever watch Doctor Strangelove?
No.
I didn't watch it either, but I know this scene because it's iconic. So there's like 50 scientists, I guess, or no, it was the war room, and they were all sitting around this circular table, and there was like a light shining on everyone's head, and it was like this kind of like crazy scenario. But like I think that like it's just such an interesting. Anyway, let me finish the story because the story is not over.
Okay.
So he, it's his job to design these two top floors. And, he spent all this time figuring out the table and all this stuff. And he's actually responsible for setting up for the big reveal for these bankers. So, he does everything from start to finish. He finds the glasses. He finds the soap. Like he sets it all up. It's like a big reveal, a big party. So the night before he comes in and he sees carved into this walnut conference table, okay, in huge letters, F you. I know, it's crazy.
So no one could see that what I just happened to me. My mouth just dropped.
I know, it's crazy. It's
Wow.
crazy. Yeah, like some construction worker, not digging your industry, some construction worker though comes in and like, just like has at her.
That is some audacity. Man.
I know. So my dad's like freaking out. He's like, I've got a party tomorrow to set up for. Like what? So he called the mill worker. The mill worker came in because the table was solid walnut. So he was buffing and shining and sanding all night, and they took care of it. And they had their big reveal, and that was it. And it went fine. But it's like crazy. And it just goes to kind of show you, like, first of all, like how projects can go wrong, at the last minute.
11th hour.
11th hour.
Yeah.
It happens. But also for me as a kid hearing that story, like it's epic. Like the excitement, like the interiors specifically, I was drawn to after hearing that story. Just how you could create such a vibe.
Do you remember how old you were?
When I heard the story, he's told it to me a bunch of times.
Like were you 10 or you?
I was probably like, I would say I was like, well, he's probably told it to me a bunch of times, but I was probably, my first recollection of hearing it, I was probably like 13.
Okay.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Like 13 or 14.
Yeah.
And I was just like, I had already been turned on to interior design just from like seeing things at 11, being inspired and stuff. Yeah. But that for me, that story about, the shape of the room, the shape of the table and the concept and like the hardware was all custom, like the custom metal details, the metal detailing, the architectural interior design features, like, back then it was the height of classicist modernism, right? Like it was flush baseboard details and shadow reveals and floor to ceiling walnut paneling and like just no expense spared. And it was, for me, I was so excited as a kid to hear about interior design and this other world you could create. Mm-hmm. So it was a bit of a path for me because then I went into architecture school and I discovered...
What school did you go to?
So I went to University of Toronto.
Yeah.
And it was a double-edged sword for me being at school.
I could imagine.
Because I had this passion for interior design. And in school, there's this like, it's so weird, Jonathan. It's like this weird arbitrary line between architecture and interior design. And I don't know where it comes from because like, where does the interior stop and the exterior start? Like, it's all this, like to me... Mm-hmm. Like it's all the same. Mm-hmm. Like it's one and the same. I don't see the boundary between the professions that exists. And so I feel like it's been a hindrance and also a strength of mine that's kind of like some of what I've, or like maybe it's better to say like how some of my evolution kind of, manifested over the years was like, it was kind of like move forward and then I feel like I'm set back, and then I move forward and then I feel like I'm set back a little bit.
That's the perpetual desire for perfection that I've come to realize that's pretty much every single architect has in their mind and never achieves, right?
Wow.
Perfection is like, it's on a pedestal that I don't think anyone can achieve. It does, but if your mind is set to wanting to get there, then you will generally hit the mark at doing your best. But if you don't see the pedestal and you don't aim for perfection, then you will constantly be complacent. So yeah, that's what I've come to realize after talking to so many people about this now.
It's so interesting because I think that there is, there's this constant pressure.
Yeah.
But, it's very much self-imposed. I do think that some people, respond to it in different ways. Like I personally do gravitate to more, like our firm is small. It's in its infancy. It's new. But at the moment, we only take on a couple projects a year. I think that's a choice because I want to do unique projects.
I want to go there, but before I go totally there, I want to ask. So what happened? You finished, and I apologize. I will come back to this. I'll steer there in a sec.
Please do.
So you went to U of T. You finished your undergrad.
Mm-hmm.
And did you do anything after that, or did you go straight into practice, or did you do a master's, or what did you do?
Yeah. So I had before we get into practice, I did have like I think this is important to say because I had a hard time in architecture school, but it's not for the reasons that someone might just like automatically think. Mm-hmm. It's not just like the long hours and like the, like the blood, sweat, and tears of it all. But it was because I wasn't getting to do what I wanted to do, which was interior design, which was not encouraged at all. So I thought, do I need to drop out to go to interior design school? And I had this like crisis point where I was like,
wait, what year of university did you have?
This is like second year master's degree.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did you do your master's at U of T as well?
I did.
Okay.
Yeah.
Crazy. So you were doing your second year master's degree, and the master's program is what? Is it a 3 or 4 year program?
It's a 4-year.
4-year program.
Yes.
So halfway into your master's, 6 years into school.
Correct.
And now questioning whether or not you've done the right thing.
Exactly.
Woo!
Yes. It was a deep, and it was, and when you have like things due and like projects due and like people are waiting for things and you're supposed to present stuff. It's a lot of pressure. Architecture school is very demanding.
Yeah.
And but I think, I'm glad I saw it through. It took me a while to really stew on it and like come to the realization that even though I'm not doing exactly what I want to do, like there was some degree of control, but like wasn't really the emphasis at U of T I found at the time was more formalistic studies about form. And there is something to be said for that. Like architecture gives you what interior design does not give you, that architecture does, is the critical thinking skills required to design and create form. Mm-hmm. And that could be anything, right?
That's why there are these beautiful installation pieces throughout the city that are designed by architects, right?
Exactly.
They're purposefully built.
They are.
And designed. So yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
So to your point, yes.
Yeah. And so it took me a while to like settle in on that thought. And then it took me even longer. Yeah. So like after architecture school, like I did the obligatory like licensing program, or it's not obligatory. It's actually not obligatory. It's voluntary.
Self-obligatory.
Exactly. Self-imposed torture.
Start to see this trend here.
Yeah. I think it's pretty common. You just can't fake architecture. It's just one of those things. It's like, you can't fake it. You got to put the time in.
Yeah.
It's a long road of learning. And I don't think you ever stop, which is cool. And so after school, I started working. I worked for about 10 years in architecture, doing condos. I had some really exciting opportunities to work in New York. I spent a lot of time there. And after a while, I got a little bit sick of doing condos in Toronto.
Just wash your face. Just go from like full excitement to like, how do I describe it? Like just cringing.
Oh my God.
Just
Yeah.
full facial cringe. Like, ugh, condos.
You know what? You learn what you don't want to do, right? Before you learn what you want to do. It's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like the opposite advent calendar. Right?
I love
Instead of being excited about opening them up, you just want to start closing them.
Yeah.
And getting down to the one door that you actually want.
Yes. Let's go through all these options and maybe figure out what it is.
Yeah.
So that's pretty much what I went through before I had an opportunity to actually settle in on something I loved, which was actually shifting everything I was doing to interior design. So I had an opportunity to work in hospitality interior design. And then I was like, okay, this feels to me like it's right for me.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So you then eventually open your own practice.
Yes.
And what year did you open your practice? What year?
2021 in the middle of the pandemic. But I just the timing was right.
Yeah.
But I also feel like, like I had a job. I had a client come to me and ask me to work with them. And so I just, I just took a chance, and, it's a journey for sure. But I think for me, the thing is, like, it's funny because it's like kind of what you said at the beginning about how it's roundabout. And like, I feel like I'm actually getting to this late in life. Like
FYI.
Yeah.
This is not late in life.
Right. Thank you.
It is so far from
Thank you for saying that.
It is not.
No, it's really not.
It's like there's.
But I want to add this as
Go ahead.
a point of context, which is compared to interior designers who got out of school in their 20s and have had businesses for 15 years already. Those are, people in the industry that are doing really well and have had time to build up. And I'm just starting to swim in those waters. That's all.
But you know what?
Yeah.
There is so much work.
Yes.
There is so much work.
In Toronto?
It's Toronto and outside of Toronto.
Yeah.
There's so much work. It is crazy. When I'm doing research for this podcast, and I'm looking up architecture practices, and I'm thinking like, oh, I've covered the 40 of them in the city, and I'll start to expand beyond that and start looking at people internationally. And like when you start the concept of even looking beyond the city, you go and you expand more upon your search within the city. There are so many practices, which means that there's so much work. There's so much. You drive on your drive here to record.
Yeah.
How many projects are you driving past with names of builders and architecture practices and interior design practices you've never even heard of?
There's a lot of work in Toronto. I feel like Toronto had a really funny arc because, or I don't want to say arc, but like Toronto had a huge construction boom for like 40 years. Like how long has only now it's like starting to slow down a little bit. But like, I feel like Toronto, like when I was working in New York, for instance, like in 2008 and 2009, 2007, 2008, more like Toronto was like the second largest or fastest growing city in North America. And in comparison, New York was like dead in comparison to how many buildings were going up in Toronto. There were construction cranes everywhere. So there was a really interesting statistic. I remember when I was in university, I studied broadcast and print journalism in university. Cool. And one of the papers I wrote, this is back in the mid 2000s, was about Dubai and how they were emerging at this time. The Palm Islands were starting to be constructed. The Burj Al Arab, which is their flagship hotel, had just been built, and there was a lot that was happening in that country. They had the most cranes per capita erected anywhere in the world. Crazy. Shortly thereafter, when I got into construction, 2017, I just researched to know, like, what does it look like now? Yeah. They were still the global leader. 10 years later, 11 years later, Toronto was number 2. Crazy. That's insane. Blown away. I was like, what? I feel like, though, they're not counting China. I don't know. China's out of the count. I don't know that China would allow you to count the cranes. Exactly.
I don't think this podcast would be able to be broadcast in China.
Oh, that's so funny.
But
yeah,
like this, you want to talk about architecture? The stuff that's happening in China is wild. But nonetheless, anyhow,
who knows what's happening in China?
Exactly.
That's all I'll say.
They know what's going on.
Yeah, they do. So, they really know what's going on. Like they've really got things moving there in a way that the rest of the world is not quite moving. Like they just have such a huge population. It's crazy.
We in 2013 we went on our honeymoon.
Did you?
We digress on.
No, I like to digress.
But we went on our honeymoon and we were going to Thailand. We're going to go backpack Thailand, Wendy and I. And when we were doing this, we stopped over in Beijing, and Beijing had just had the Olympics there prior to this.
What year was this?
This was 2013.
Okay.
Beijing, I think, had the Olympics. I could be wrong, but I
was there around then. Wait, when was there? When was there Biennale? They also had like an expo.
I don't know.
In Beijing. Okay.
I don't know. Anyway. All I know is that we had a long.
Oh, the nest. Do you remember the nest in Beijing they made for the Olympics? It was like this crazy huge nest.
It was like the stadium?
Yes, the stadium, the bird's nest.
Yeah, I think
it was by. Do you remember the?
No, I don't. I know the majority of facilities that are built for the Olympics actually become vacant and become these like desolate, like disgusting carbon footprints.
So it's very true.
But the Beijing airport was so big.
Yeah.
That we found a wing where we could literally go to sleep on these chairs that like expanded.
Yeah.
And there was no one. And because it was so big, it was so poorly run on HVAC.
Oh, no.
It was so cold in this plane.
Man.
Anyhow, I completely digress.
Overrunning.
StudioWI.
But that is, I feel like that's a dichotomy in China. Like they have the capacity to like make so much, but then sometimes the things that they make are just not like, it's like too much.
Yeah.
It's like over.
You remember, do you see when the pandemic started, how they erected a hospital in 24 hours?
That's crazy.
You ever seen the video?
I don't know.
There was a time-lapse video that I watched, and I was like, how is this happening? And they literally, with prefabricated panels and everything, they built a full hospital in 24 hours.
I believe that. That's how
all these lights up. Like the infrastructure capacity to be able,
and the ingenuity.
And like the ingenuity, the engineering, all of it.
Yeah.
Anyhow.
It's a very It's a crazy place. I have been there, and it's an amazing place to go to. But
2021.
But 2021. So
it
started all back then.
StudioWI.
So I was gonna say New York was great place to go, and I also realized there this was really interesting. So from like the biggest firm down to like the smallest firms there, the architects, because it's structural for them there, because there's not as much new construction. The architects practice interior design.
Right.
That's just what they do. Yeah. They do the restaurants. They have to. They do the restaurants. They do the hotels. They do the residences. And there's no division. I sometimes in Toronto feel like there's two separate professions. And I don't know if they're always like incommunicado, if you know what I mean. Like they're not always, sometimes they butt heads. And I also kind of feel like it's not always like for the betterment of a project. Like I feel like I've worked on projects where I've been brought in as the architect. I've also worked on projects where I've been brought in as the interior designer.
Oh, interesting.
Absolutely. A lot of our work is interior design.
Okay.
Yeah. And so this is where I find I don't fit the mold, because I don't know if a lot of architects in Toronto like actually want to do interior design.
I think that a lot of practices that I've spoken to over the years, many of them will take on interior design as a part of their service offering.
Yeah.
But it is a separate service in some ways. So like they're going to structure their agreements to be architecturally set up, but then if people want, they would also be able to sign on for interiors.
Yes.
I personally have never heard of a practice that said, I want to do the interiors alone and I'll have someone else do the architecture.
Yeah, so we're doing
in for that.
Yeah, so we're different in that way, because
totally I
don't have any qualms doing interior design. I mean, I think that people are, it's funny. I feel like this is a deep vein.
Yeah.
I see plans. I've been given plans from architects, and, certain things in the layouts don't really make sense once you introduce cabinetry or drapery and then from the other side, sometimes when I see interior designers work, I'm like, you really can't do this. Like, this is not to code, or this isn't going to make sense, layout wise in some way or another. And, like basic things that you think an architect would think about, they really just don't consider. They kind of like stop at the exterior, and it messes things up on the inside. Like, you want to think about sight lines.
Yeah.
You want to think about where the furniture is going. You want to think about how the furniture, what it's going to feel like and look like, because I don't know, it impacts the space down to the smallest detail. And that's why I think some people also feel like when they wanted to do a renovation project, it's like, have you heard the saying? It's like renovation is like, really, I empathize with my clients because it's so stressful. It's like the second most stressful thing aside from death and divorce, or third most stressful thing aside from death and divorce. And it's like renovation. And I think it's unnecessarily so. Like, I really think that, after working on 50, 60, 70-story towers, a house is not, it's a small project in comparison. And to have two design professionals do a house, it extends the timelines unnecessarily. Like, tell me something. If you were an owner, okay, if you were a homeowner.
I have to be impartial on this.
Be very impartial. This is going to be a very leading style question.
I already know where this question's going.
Do you? Are you a mind reader? If you were a homeowner and you could get the same outcome for less time and less hassle with one designer on the project, would you not do that? like if you could get the same outcome.
So I will say this. Okay?
Yes.
So
yes.
I mean, in one way, the answer would be yes, but there is another side to that, and the other side to that is this. This is not to take away from what you're describing as an offering, but I do know that there are some people out there that have a really strong affinity towards certain designers if they've really established themselves well in their careers and what they design.
Of course.
And as a result of that, I think that there are homeowners out there that are willing to go through the design exercise.
Absolutely.
And in some ways deal with what the outcome of that is.
Absolutely.
To be able to get their ultimate dream home.
Absolutely.
Integrated design is obviously in many ways an easier method of design. An
easier task if you can achieve it.
If you need to ask, if as a builder when we're doing what we do with building, like when we issue RFIs.
Yes.
Right? If you have to issue RFIs and it has to go to both architect and interior designer.
Yes.
Generally, you're going to wait on someone in some way. And they both might have differences of opinions on what the design outcome is going to be.
Yes.
And so then you have to stir it.
Yes.
And until you get the taste you're looking for.
Absolutely.
And when you're dealing with it in the space you're referring to, you're emailing one person, and they might have a lot of the practices that I'm aware of.
Yes.
They'll have an interiors division within the practice.
Yes. I mean, like, I'm fortunate.
It's a roundabout answer.
I'm fortunate right now that I'm taking on the amount of work where I can have my hands on everything.
Right.
And that's very intentional.
Yep.
But I think, like, also, I get from builders all the time telling me how much they love my drawings, how good I am to work with, because I solve all the problems. I hate to say, I solve a lot of problems, and I do think a lot of interior designers now have very good drawings.
Yes.
I don't think that was always the case necessarily.
Agreed.
But I think, it's interesting in Toronto, there are so many very talented interior designers that they've almost carved out like this. And I think it kind of, like, my hypothesis is, like, it kind of started with Brian Gluckstein. who I worked with, but I think like he really, because he taught at Ryerson for so long, he really brought up like a whole generation of interior designers. But I think that, you know, they've carved out to their, you know, to their credit, they've really carved out like a very good kind of niche. But I also feel that architects, why have architects kind of, you know, just like given away this area, this area of design, they've just like forfeited completely. Like that to me, I think is like a shame. And I think it's just like such a rich like area to work in. And, you know, like I feel very fortunate to have had that experience in hospitality design, to learn to really make these like very layered, sophisticated spaces that maybe you wouldn't get to if you hadn't had that experience in design.
So you are lucky that you got to work on 60 to 70 different condo buildings.
The condo buildings, but also like switching. Yeah. So it turns out I am lucky that I worked in architecture for sure. But I definitely have a very interior design kind of approach to it.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you're at a stage now where the practice is now 3 years old.
Correct.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Projects that you initially looked at were some renovation projects. Where are you now with the projects, and what is the ambition, and what direction are you wanting to lead the practice?
Yeah, great question. So, you know, right now we're doing a lot of renovation.
Yeah.
I actually do love renovation. It's great because you really see the transformation.
Yeah.
And people are so thrilled with that, because you can really envision something that they hadn't thought about, or like the end result is always so gratifying.
Yeah, they didn't know that their space could perform in the way that it's going to.
Exactly. Like this one loft space that we're currently working on. It's really just the third floor of a home, and it's an existing space. And we worked with the architecture of the space to not only like emphasize the best parts of the space, but also create like a certain sense of drama around it. You know, it has a sloped roof. The bed is centered in the middle of the slope on the rear elevation, and like just to think about the sense of drama that the architecture creates. And then like from an architectural standpoint, like adding like almost like architectural lighting to a space, because the space had such poor, like if you could have seen the space before we started, it was like random pieces of furniture, you know, nothing was matching. There was a TV on a stand. Now it's like everything is integrated, you know, everything is customized. And the lighting that went from like, you know, spotty and dark, you know, we really focused on getting very like different, there was a lighting plan with different levels, different layers of lighting that you can introduce into a space. And actually like the floor lamps that you choose, and like the table lamps, and like things that architects maybe sometimes don't want to specify, are like critical. Like all these little things are critical to the design in the end. And, you know, like when your client says like, I want like a luxurious feel, I want to feel like I'm in a Four Seasons hotel room. We know how to do that. Yeah. And that's where I see our firm going. We want to, sorry, I was just thinking of, I'm gonna do like a little like, okay, so I actually brought you something.
Okay.
This reminds me of something that I wanted to give you. Have you seen this before?
Yeah.
Crystal Head vodka.
Yeah.
So, okay, their tagline, can I just read their tagline? We catapult imagination into reality.
By getting you drunk.
By getting you sloshed. Oh my God. It's so funny. And then like the inside, the description's hilarious. It's like filtered through Harkheimer diamonds and blended with pristine Newfoundland water. Hilarious. Distilled 4 times from the highest quality, locally sourced
Newfoundland water.
Canadian corn.
I didn't know it was Newfoundland water. Beth, what are you doing? Thank you. This is amazing.
Yeah, it's cool. So it's like It's a vodka that's in the glass. The bottle is in the shape of a skull.
I'm gonna when this episode launches, I'm gonna ask you actually to take a picture of this because I'm gonna
For sure.
This is hilarious.
It cultivates the creative spirit.
I'm handing Beth my phone so she can take a picture of this because this is just amazing.
Sweet. I love it. Hold on, let me get this. There we go.
So
nice.
I
love it.
When I put up your episode, I'll put this photo up. That is awesome. Thank you, Beth.
So it's just brought to you from our friends at Crystal Head Vodka. Now back to our regular programming.
I will shamelessly tell you that there's a plug that I will give you here. One of our suppliers.
Please do.
Because you're talking about lighting.
Yes.
So I will tell you that I experienced something with one of our providers that has literally changed my perception of light. Mm-hmm. Lutron.
Yes.
Lutron Ketra system.
Okay.
Okay. You want to talk about?
Let's talk about it.
A lighting.
I love talking about lighting. I could talk about lighting for days.
So
let's geek out.
Yeah. So we're installing the Ketra system in one of our projects right now, and just to give you an understanding of are you familiar with Ketra?
Not Ketra, but
okay.
Lutron.
Okay. So Ketra.
Not Ketra. Not definitely. This is new.
Okay. So I mean, between when we've recorded this and when it airs, you will be familiar with Ketra.
Nice.
I'll introduce you to everyone. But
amazing. Thank you.
So Ketra, I mean, for what it's worth, Lutron has a couple thousand engineers that work on their products. Mm-hmm. Multiple thousands of people that work on this line. They bought Ketra. Lutron bought Ketra. It's based out of Austin, Texas, and their light has an ability to change in variation with 16 million different hues.
That's crazy.
Okay, great, 60 million hues. Yeah, great,
no,
yeah,
that's mind blowing.
It is mind blowing.
It's mind blowing.
And so they're in the process now. They have showrooms and.
Are they the only ones doing this?
Yes. No one. I mean, there's other brands that say that they can do this, but there is nothing like this.
Wow.
Nothing. So
amazing.
When I say all of this, you can have. With their lighting controls, you can set it so that it is in conjunction with outdoor lighting based on where you live. I'm forgetting the term. What's the term? Your clock, how your body reacts.
Oh, your circadian.
Yeah, thank
clock?
you. Your circadian rhythm.
Yeah.
So, thank you. That was it.
Yeah, nice.
Lighting.
I got it.
So I'm saying all this because
that's important.
Beth brought. As referencing this loft project, she brought some of the visuals that are representative of this project, and I'm looking at the lighting, and I'm like, man, if this was Ketra,
right? Yeah, we needed Ketra on this project.
So, but you'll have it on other ones because once you understand this, so I explained what this system was.
Yeah,
to Brenda Eisen and a few others that I have, Vanessa Fong and a few others, Drew Mandel. Once they've experienced this, they're like, everything I have to spec now is going to be Ketra.
That's unreal.
Why I say it is because you can control the light and you can control the color. And so let's say you wanted to go and have in your room here, it was time to wake up. The lighting control would be able to automatically wake up when you want to wake up. And it would phase with the sun.
That is unbelievable because the challenge is always you have to spec the temperature.
That's right.
And it's annoying. And then you have to coordinate all the different temperatures. So what do you do? And do you want a nighttime vibe or do you want a day? Because I can't have both.
and those lamps are going to help represent the type of day and what type of light you want in that room.
Yes.
But you can, with this system, you can do that. So
I
sound like I work for Lutron right
now.
But I'm saying
do you?
It is
this a paid advertisement?
Not yet. But it is completely game changing. So imagine you had a service technician in your mechanical room that had to be there for 3 hours and it's a dark room in your house. But you gave that guy proper natural light.
That's
you want to go spend
crazy.
the money in your mechanical room? Maybe not. But if the gentleman working in there or the technician, I say gentleman.
Yeah.
If the technician working in there could work in what seemed like daylight, don't you think that he would be happy and he would do the job even better?
Absolutely.
For sure.
Lighting is so key. It's something that these are one of the pain points I find in interior design and architecture is that sometimes the clients are not aware of like how important certain things are. And there's not really a good way to explain things to people. Like you really have to show them through example or precedent. But lighting is one of those things. It's like it's make or break, kind of, especially if it's an unusual room such as this.
Yeah.
You really can't, like if you have a sloped roof, you don't want to put pot lights on the slopes. You don't want to do that. You want something that's kind of even.
Mm-hmm.
That's going to create like puddles. Maybe you won't want them. It's not going to give overall general illumination.
Yep.
So it's, you know, like you have to carefully, and we also had a lighting consultant work with us, which we almost always do.
Mm-hmm.
But on this project, it was very important because
it highlights the architecture.
It highlights the architecture.
And if you don't do this right, then the architecture can actually be lost. And the room doesn't feel the way that it's supposed to feel.
Thank you. Thank you. And that's all the lighting, right? Like if you have dark corners, like that makes rooms feel weird.
Yeah.
And so like we purposely put on the ends of the headboards, like when we imagine all the custom millwork and all the details, we put lights on the end of the headboards that land in the corners of the room. So that you don't end up with dark corners.
So what she's describing here, you'll be able to see on our Instagram page. If you look at Behind the Build, I'm assuming that this project will be one of the projects you want to feature I would love to as a part of the Instagram. So you'll see what we're talking about as we're pointing to the images that we're looking at here in the studio. You'll see these images and you'll understand that when you look at the angles of this pitched roof, we're just a little bit past the dormers, you'll see that there's some end tables by the couch. And by those end tables, you'll see where the light is actually illuminating the corner.
That's right.
As the roof slopes into what is a very small knee wall.
Exactly. And actually, like everything about this room was a challenge because you can only stand up to essentially where those dormers are.
Yeah.
You can only stand like kind of like to that point, and then you really do rely on the space inside those dormers to like sit and stand. So like those couches were selected specifically because they have massive armrests, which pull you in from those because you don't want to like get up and hit the side of that knee wall, you know?
Yeah.
And so the integration in this room with lighting was key, and everything about this room had to really work and function.
And this is going to make like when people wake up, okay, when they wake up in the morning, they're going to feel a certain way. They just are. I'm feeling a certain way looking at it.
Absolutely. And across the room, you actually have, so the millwork, this is my absolute like favorite thing to do is millwork. I just love designing it. So on the other side of the room, the millwork is built into the shape of the space, and concealed inside the millwork is on one side like a kitchenette, like a little bar. And on the other side is a television. The doors are designed to fold, slide open, and then tuck in so that they're not in the way. And then in the center of this millwork wall, you have this like millwork arch with a light. And it's a lovely way to enter the space. Mm-hmm. It keeps everything clean. And it also makes...
It hides it when you're walking up. If they're going to tour people in their house, you walk up and you're like, well, what am I about to see through this archway? And then all of a sudden the room reveals itself.
Exactly. Yeah. And it's special. And it the three words that I like to use to describe this is like, it's like a luxurious plush nest, you know, it's like a space that feels plush. All the materials we chose were reflective of that desire to feel plushness. So the floor was silky and soft, and all the cushions and everything was very tactile.
I will say this, that when it comes to millwork, if you are not an interior designer or an architect and you're listening to this, when it comes to your millwork, do not cheap out on the quality of your hinges and your hardware. When you're talking about having doors that open up and they're going to slide back, you need to make sure that you're going to be working with really, really good quality hardware on that.
Yes, absolutely.
Because as they continue to open and close, if you have a millworker that's not doing this well, those doors over time are not going to sit well.
Oh yeah. And like, you don't want to cheap out there, but this client really is not cheaping out on anything.
It's the right client.
It is, like the client makes such a huge difference to the project. Yeah. And having great clients is everything. Completely. And they make or break a project. They can make it great, or they can, decide to take in another direction, then maybe not consult you on some things, and really the project goes a whole other way. And they don't always realize also they don't necessarily think about like how some decisions are going to impact the overall design aesthetic, and then it gets away from you.
Yeah.
And that's like, as a designer, you're like, oh, that's tough. Like you struggle with that for a long time.
so I look at our time, and we're
yes,
we're nearing the end of this, and so
right.
I want to ask a few other questions.
It has gone by real fast.
I told Beth when we started, I was like, there hasn't been a person that's come on here that hasn't said, "Wow, that went by fast." But
it's just such a pleasure.
Well, thanks.
Thank you.
Family.
Yes. Mine?
Yeah, tell me about your family.
Okay. Actually, yeah, I'd love to talk about my family.
And I say this because, to me, one of the keys in all of this is that, yes, that there is the architecture, and yes, there's interiors, but we are all people, and everyone that's in this industry, they finish their day, and they need to spend it with those that they love. Absolutely. So.
And I have, very fortunate, I have a lot of people who I love very much. And my husband, actually, he's also an architect. Oh. And we work together on projects from time to time. And I haven't talked about any of those, but I guess that's podcast number 2.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's a lovely feeling when you feel like your job and your home kind of have this kind of nice integration. And I think like our kids, we have 2 children. I think our kids, well, I don't know, it's too early. They're very young. It's too early to know like really what they think of it all, but because they're 5 and 8.
Yep.
But
same age as my kids.
Really?
Yeah, 5 and 8.
Cool. Yeah, so it's a great age, but we'll see what they make of it all. My daughter actually did say something very funny the other day, and I was just like, if we could only think like children, she was like, my mom is the most famous architect in Toronto. And I was like, okay.
How many architects does she know? You are.
I am, exactly. But it was just like, I love it. Like, it's just, anyway, kids are so uplifting.
Yeah. And grounding.
And like they do give you a reason to like at the end of the day like close it all down. Yeah. And like I really, really cherish that and protect that. And it just takes a lot of patience and time and resilience because it's difficult balancing all those factors, all those things. It's very hard when you have young kids. Yeah. Very hard. Yep. Just to have young kids, let alone like work and all that other stuff. So, but my husband makes it easy because he's such a great partner, and he's also super talented, and he is the I in we.
Oh, he's the I.
He's the I. I'm the Wassermuhl. He's the I Eclectic.
Got it.
Yeah. So we partner well.
Okay.
Yeah.
And free time, what do you like to do with it? Outside of family, what are things that you do for yourself?
Oh, I could go on for days. I do take time for myself. I must be like a millennial or something because I do like pride myself on self-care. Yep. But I love to be active and work out, and I really, really need it. I crave it, and I find it's really good for my mental health.
Yep.
And so I run. But really, I'll do anything that's active. I used to dance. I used to play tennis. Yeah. I just tried that again recently. It was really fun. But I tried pickleball. That was cool. Have you tried pickleball?
I have.
What do you think?
I'm not a fan.
As a tennis guy,
I'm not a fan of the kitchen.
Of the kitchen.
Of the kitchen. It's the area of apparently in pickleball. Is
that right?
area closest to the net. Maybe
that's called the kitchen.
Maybe I was misinformed.
All right, I know. I'll take your word for it.
I'm now as we're talking about this, I'm going to look it up.
Nobody was explaining the game to me. I just picked it up and started playing. I probably was playing completely wrong, but it's fun. It's a good time. So I love doing that. I love traveling.
Sorry.
Yeah, tell me about the kitchen.
7-foot zone on each side of the net is known as the non-volley zone, more commonly referred to as the kitchen of the pickleball court.
But how deep is the pickleball? Like 7 feet? Like,
exactly.
Well, so with the back like alley is 2 feet. What's that zone called?
I don't know. Pickleball.
That's the dining room.
Exactly. Yeah. And when you're running, are you running distance or are you running
I run. I love to run. I get that like runner's high. I never run more than 30 minutes.
Okay.
But I try to get faster and faster. And I try to run 2 to 3 times a week.
Okay.
Yeah. What about you?
It's funny. So when I started the podcast, I had a number of people on, one of whom like races. Jordan Heckman from Jordan Station. He does races all year.
That's amazing.
So he started talking about running, and I had been a hiatus from running. I had fallen out of love with it.
Oh no! What?
Yeah, and then I had Vanessa Fong on, and Vanessa and I over the years have always talked about running, but again, I'd fallen out of love with it. And then I had Linda Lau on, and she was talking about running, and then Winda invited me to join her on a 24-hour race from Toronto to Collingwood. On a team, and I was like, I'm not running right now. But after talking to everybody about running, I was like, all right, I'm strapping on my shoes. And for the last few months,
convinced me.
I've been running again.
Oh, wow. How was it getting back into it?
It's interesting. So previously, I don't know, we're talking about me. You asking me? But previously when I was running, I was running with earbuds, and I was listening to either podcasts or I was listening to music. And now I'm running with nothing. So I put a heart rate monitor on. Mm-hmm. I have a watch, and I don't bring my phone. Mm-hmm. And I just focus on my breathing and my running. And I found that I'm running now faster than when I was before.
That makes sense.
So now, it sounds silly, but I'm a very competitive person with myself. Like, I will chase my own shadow.
Nice.
And
That's
so
good.
I'm like, my goal is to get to a point where I could run kilometers in about a 4:30, 4:20.
I love that though, because when like what you're talking about, I feel like is like focusing on the mental game.
Yes.
Like being able to like really get the coordination between like your breath and your mind and the quietening of everything else, right?
Yes. Yeah. It's
good.
It's amazing.
Meditative.
So I ran my first 10K plus. At our cottage in Muskoka.
It's amazing.
A month and a half ago.
Wow.
And I was like, I had so much gas left in the tank. I was like, I think I could have run probably 18, 20 today.
What?
But I also feel guilty when I'm away from my family for
that long.
For an hour on a run. I'm like, I should go home. I should go be present. But then I'm like, I just want to keep going. And I cannot believe you just talked about me.
No, I love it. Thank you for sharing that.
About you, Beth.
It is. It's all about us.
Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you for having me.
I actually can't believe how fast this went by. I got to find a way. We'll have you back on. Talk about more.
Love to.
Thank you so much for joining.
There's so much more to talk about. There's so much always to talk about. So anytime, and I really appreciate it. It's been a blast.
It's my pleasure. And to close things out, I don't have things to give you other than a memory of what you'll experience when we're done.
Cool.
This is something fun for you. So
I like that.
Thank you.
Thank you
again.
You're welcome. Thanks again.